Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 5, Episode 8. It is called Unification 2. So full spoilers for the episode as always. First of all, apologies for the gap between this and the last episode. Connor, as may have been mentioned in the last episode, but certainly has been mentioned in other things since, had COVID. So recording was more of a struggle for a little while.
A little sketchy for a week or two.
Yes. And he has recovered, clearly. He seems to be back to his, well, as close to 100% as Connor can get, I suppose.
Yeah, I've still got a little bit of a cough. My sense of smell is questionable at best. But otherwise, I think I'm more or less all right now.
We have the second half of the Spock two-parter with the Romulans, and would you believe it, Romulan Tasha is at it again and is actually behind a whole scandalous plot here to just use Spock to trick basically into invading Vulcan so that they can, though I mean they'll unify, but they'll unify under them in charge, under Romulan
Conquest,
rule.
as they put it.
Yes, it's conquest, yes. But technically that's still unifying in a way, I suppose. If you...
Unifying by force is still unifying, yes, I can't argue with that.
It's just a simple logic. So I'll say this episode is good, and I will say that there's some couple of standout scenes in it. I do think, though, that for the episode that's going to have Spock in it, it's not quite the blow away episode that I think I was expecting it to be.
I agree. I also think it's good. Just good. But yeah, I mean, there's some moments of greatness, but overall, there's a feeling of, I don't want to say it's coasting by, because that sounds really harsh, but almost like it's coasting by on the fact that, we got Spock, we don't need to put as much effort into the actual plot here.
I think it came from a couple of things for me. One was the pacing of the episode, or perhaps more accurately, the momentum of the story, and that it kind of doesn't really have much of a driving force for quite a lot of the runtime. It's about Spock wanting to go see this, I can't remember the exact role that the character played. He's like a politician, basically. And
A senator, right?
Maybe a senator, yeah. He wants to go see him, and he goes to see him, right? So there's a little bit of waiting to go see him. He goes to see him, and the senator's like, yeah, I'm all for reunification. You know, it'll be hard and it'll be tough, but that's what I'm all about. And it's like, oh, something came up. Meet again tomorrow? He's like, yeah, sure. And then it's kind of about just a lot of conversations about the fact that there's probably something fishy going on because he seems too gung-ho about it. And it's likely that there's ulterior motives at play. But ultimately, it's about waiting until that second meeting. It doesn't really feel like there's like a defined goal in the episode that is going to be achieved. Like, there doesn't feel like there's something that it's driving for a good half of the episode.
It's like, let's just wander around and see what civilization's like out here, which is interesting to a point, but we kind of got a good chunk of that last time. And the senator, he might have been consul, actually, I might be mixing them up. But either way, whatever he is, it's interesting enough, again, like, just enough to get the plot forward, but not enough that you're sitting there wondering what the next move is. You're not thinking ahead as to, what's he actually gonna do? You're just kind of waiting for it to unfold.
Yeah, so there's not really much of a driving force, and I really felt that for what's supposed to be the second half of a two-parter, and typically second halves of two-parters will have a lot of driving force because usually they've been so set up in the first half that you almost have nothing but action in that second half often, because it'll be paying off on all the things that were set up in the first half. And honestly, I think I'll say that I prefer part one over part two. I think Picard, the mystery of why Spock's out there, going to find Spock, going to see Sarek and having that kind of last meeting, and then finding out Sarek's dead. Like, I think all of that combined made for a more of an engrossing episode to me. Don't get me wrong, there's a couple of key scenes with Spock in this that are very good. There really is.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a lot of scenes with Spock in this that just kind of feel like ho hum. Like they just kind of feel like he's in a random scene just talking to people about what's going on, as opposed to it feeling like it's important. Which kind of weird.
It's kind of weird as well. Like from our perspective, it's not that long since we finished watching the original series, right?
Mm-hmm.
Spock being back isn't special, I guess, in the same way that it would have been at the time. To us, so I wonder if maybe at the time, just every scene and any scene with him there, was good enough. Whereas now, looking at it through a bit more of a critical lens, with that time divorce from it, it's like, yeah, I mean, some of it's fine. It's just, but it's just Spock wandering around. We just had 3 seasons and movies of Spock just wandering around, chatting nonsense half the time. Let's be honest. So it didn't feel anything. It didn't feel anything special to us, but maybe it would have done at the time.
Yeah, it's. Joe, I think makes it a little bit anticlimactic. It's because we spent so much time building up to like why is Spock there, and we kind of had the theories. Well, he's there to probably start the process of unifying, the Romulans and the Vulcans. That's just kind of the obvious thing that he's doing. But I think it was kind of a setback to discover that he's just kind of there to like see that someone might be interested in doing it, as opposed to, oh, he's already had plans in motion that are actually more concrete. It doesn't feel like it felt like he was probably secretly had already achieved something. But I
think where it gets to at the end, and there are points throughout with like the kid,
mm-hmm.
where it feels like Spock is actively like teaching this grassroots movement. And it definitely is where he gets to by the end, but it feels like maybe he should have been a bit more actively involved in that side of things already, but by the time we got here.
I actually think the ending with him saying, no, I'm going to stay anyway, because like these people who are learning about Vulcan history and they're caring about Vulcan language and traditions, this is actually the start of something that I can help guide them on. And it might take decades, it might take way beyond my death, but like they will get there, they'll get to this point. I actually like that quite a bit. I think maybe my complaints really like mix what I said about it having this lack of like momentum and the fact that he didn't really feel like he'd achieved anything. I think those go hand in hand with ultimately the villains in this episode being kind of lame. I don't think Counselor Guy, who's kind of like I may have said this in the first part, but he was giving me kind of like knockoff, what's his name? Agent Smith.
Hugo
Weaving, yeah. He had a Hugo Weaving smile at multiple points.
I love how like your go-to role for Hugo Weaving is Agent Smith.
Why, what's your go-to role?
I don't know. I mean, probably I would go to Elrond, let's be honest, because I'm me. But he's such a prolific actor. It's sort of things. I love seeing what various people's go-to role is.
I'm willing to bet you that Agent Smith is probably the most common.
I don't know about that.
I think Matrix is huge. Matrix was huge.
It was, but so was Lord of the Rings.
Yes, but he was one of like 50 in Lord of the Rings. Agent Smith is a much more prominent character in Matrix than
he is. I also would suspect that a few years younger than us, the go-to role would be Red Skull.
Nah, I don't believe it.
No, we don't like that movie.
No, but you can't see his face. He's got a stupid red face on for most of the movie.
I don't think it matters.
I think it does. He's Agent Smith. That is his most prolific role. Come on now. Don't even give me this shit.
I'm giving you this shit.
I don't even think it's a question. I think you're crazy if you don't think.
Comments can argue amongst themselves.
Agent Smith is easily his most prolific role. He ruined it himself. Well, I won't. It may be the Wachowski's fault more than his, but he ruined it in the second and the third movies. Like that character was terrible in those movies, but in that first movie, that was his prolific role. And yes.
He's one of the very few actors to play the same character across in all 3 movies of a trilogy in 3 different trilogies.
What's the third one?
Transformers. He voices Megatron. Is it Megatron for the bad guy? Yeah.
Aye.
Yeah.
You knowing that. You just
That's just one of those random trivia facts in my head. Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
I really like Hugo Weaving. What do you want me to say? He's a great actor.
he's good as Agent Smith. I don't know if I've liked him in like almost any other role. But
Well, that's because you're terrible and have no taste.
Anyway, like the point I was trying to make before you put us on the stupid tangent, because you have
He's a
awful
knockoff Hugo Weaving. Yeah.
yes, like he's not terribly compelling, and the reveal that dun 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 Sella's working with him, and she comes in, and I was like, oh okay, I guess this kind of makes sense because we know she's been up to stuff and try to like.
It was one of those things that I also kind of was like, of course, but it wasn't like surprising in a satisfying way. It was just like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about her. Yeah,
it was kind of just an unsatisfying because don't get me wrong, I enjoyed her inclusion in the premiere of the season. I thought they did some interesting stuff, you know, but at least better than it perhaps had any right to be. But they're like, you know,
Convoluted origin,
right? But it was a convoluted origin that played into a really good episode and kind of like played with the sci-fi stuff in a fun way. So I was cool with it, but it kind of felt like, wait, we're doing this in Spock's episode.
It feels like she has to be involved in everything Romulan going forward now, and I don't like that.
The sad part for me is, and again, wanting this to be a more prominent episode, like a more important episode for Spock to be in, instead of feeling like it being a two-parter design just to revolve around Spock, which is fine, like on the surface that's fine, but it being just that and not really feeling like it was going much beyond that. Because what I was hoping for is I was hoping for Spock sort of like crossing over with that Star Trek Next Gen magic, that, you know, Picard has to stand up and make a speech, or there's a real moral dilemma, and have Spock be at the center of what that moral conundrum or diplomatic conundrum is. And instead it's more just, no, we have sort of mustache twirling villains who try to get away with an invasion and they have to put a stop to it. I don't know, like that element to me was like not really what I was hoping for with my Spock inclusion in Star Trek Next Generation.
Yeah. No, I get it. It's important in the grand scheme of things in terms of overall mythos, yeah, where it leaves it, like I say, going forward. You know, you can feel already, you know, the ramifications this will have. But the episode itself doesn't feel important.
No. It feels shockingly not that important.
It feels like a, you know, it's a middle of the road, perfectly good episode of the season, which is not a bad thing, but it's not one of the standouts. And it you know, and if it is, it's only because of Spock's inclusion.
Yeah, I mean, there's two scenes that stick out to me that are particularly good, and the best one is probably Spock and Data getting to like, I was actually a little bit shocked, and I know obviously he makes the choice to stay at the end of the episode, but part of me kind of wanted to see him interact with the rest of the crew. Like I kind of wanted to see him on the bridge, like just sort of like having a, even just for one scene, just sort of seeing everything and maybe feeling some, like, dare I say, nostalgia, you know, something, because Spock, you know, as we see in this episode, he is more Vulcan than he is human, but the weight of certain things does hit him, you know, at the end of the episode in particular. But
you want him standing on the Enterprise again and just looking around, is what you're saying. Because
he name drops Kirk in his first scene. You know, he talks about how Enterprise captains, you know, tend to be stubborn or something. You know, like he has a couple of little lines like that, and it's fine. It doesn't have to all be references or anything like that, but you know, there's this moment with Data, because Data in many ways is this show's Spock, in that he is the prominent non-human character, and the scene directly kind of compares the parallels, but they're kind of parallels in the opposite direction, which they point out, but it's a really because of how these two characters are, it actually doesn't feel cheap to have them just outright point out their differences, because Spock thinks it's fascinating that Data is trying to be more human. But Spock is exactly the sort of character who would state that out and say, that is fascinating, that you're trying to do that. And Data acknowledges, and you're trying to suppress your humanity. Like, you're suppressing the one thing that I have been searching for my whole existence. Like, that was actually a really fascinating little crossover between them.
It was a lovely moment of, you know, grass is always greener on the other side, essentially.
Yeah.
What it boils down to. And like I say, with other characters, you could not get away with this being text. It would have to be subtext.
Yeah, but because
with these two, absolutely you can do this.
Yeah, because Data always states the facts because he's an android, and because Spock always speaks in these very matter-of-fact, logical terms, you know,
They flout societal norms because they don't quite understand them, or at least human societal norms.
And it works really well, and because Data even points out that Spock uses a human expression at one point, and then he just kind of pauses and goes, "Fascinating." It's like there's a little bit there. It's almost like if these two had to spend any extended period of time together, it'd probably be like therapy for both of them. Like Data can learn that it's okay that he's a little bit different and special, because that's actually kind of something that humans tend to long for, and Spock can realize that he shouldn't necessarily run from his emotions quite so much. And to an extent, he kind of does have that arc in this episode, because when he mind melds with Picard at the end, because Picard mind melded with Sarek, he has some Sarek in him, and he can finally get a chance. Picard offers, "Hey, do you want to connect with what he left behind?"
To be fair, I think that has been Spock's decades-long arc at this point.
Yeah, it has.
It's always been kind of the end point of, just slowly soften the edges as it goes on.
But Data's, like, having him interact with Data, like, obviously he had lots of beats in the original series and the movies, and he maybe met characters who were one-offs who could maybe, like, shine a light on some of his facets. I'm sure he did. I don't have any examples in mind, but
it definitely happened.
But with Data, because Data is a character who we have now had for longer than Spock had, like, Data's been in more episodes of this show than Spock had in the original series, and because of that, it's actually far more impactful to us, because we're effectively having the two equal characters now face off in a meeting of minds, and that's like super fascinating. And yeah, I guess there's a bit of a disappointment that there's not more of that in this episode. There's not more of Spock challenging, or even have Spock meet Worf. What's that interaction like?
Yeah, there's like I said, there's glimpses of greatness in this episode.
Yeah, like Spock. I mean, again, because he's another alien on the crew, and Spock was the one alien we had in the original show, but also because Worf's the first Klingon like officer, in Starfleet. Like, it'd be funny to see Spock react to that. Not that he doesn't know, but like just see it for himself and sort of acknowledge it, and again, probably drop a fascinating or two as he watches Worf interact with the crew and how he mingles
Spock's
with them.
History with the Klingons, is pretty, I won't say unique, but it's entangled. It goes back. He definitely has opinions. It would just be, again, interesting to see his analysis almost of the crew, in the same way he analyzes Data in this scene.
Yeah,
you kind of want him to see him go around the bridge and kind of sound off on everyone else. And
I can't believe I'm going to say this, right? But dare I say, one of the most interesting interactions we could possibly have is him and Troy, because Troy can basically say that he's feeling something, even if he's like pretending he's not.
You're feeling shit. Stop trying to lie. I know you're feeling stuff.
Like, and it wouldn't even have to be something that's spoken. Like, you could have just like someone comments that Spock is being all Vulcan and not feeling anything, and just have her smirk a little bit. And she won't like embarrass him. She won't like betray his like persona or what he's doing. But you can just see in her face that she knows that's not true or something. Like, you could do something with that.
It's shocking to me we haven't had Troy around Vulcans more often in the show, because it's not that they don't feel anything, it's that they suppress them. Yeah. Like, do they suppress them so much she can't sense them? Like, we haven't really played with that very much.
Yeah. And of course Spock's an interesting case though, because he is part human and he is arguably suppressing it more, or he has to put more effort into suppressing it perhaps than
and we know he doesn't always succeed.
Yeah. So it feels like there's just some missed opportunities with this, in terms of just like having Spock interact with more characters, but then more so just I can live without that. Maybe that's a little bit fan fiction, maybe that's a little bit fan servicey even, and I can see that argument, although I do think there's like fascinating, because the scene with Data is so interesting, because it's not just he gets to meet Data, this is great seeing these two interact. I actually feel like it was a study of both characters, and it was like shining a mirror on both of them.
I think what's important is Spock is not important at this point, because if we're treating Spock like as a guest star, and the rule with guest stars we always talk about is you have to enhance something for our characters. They don't matter. Guest actor development is basically irrelevant. Even when it's Spock, it kind of doesn't really matter because they're not coming back. But Data learned something from this interaction, and that's what's important. And I feel like there are easily ways that they could have had that, of various iterations of that with other crew members, where they could have also had moments of reflection and learning from Spock.
Yeah, I think the idea that Spock suppresses his emotions and Data, we've often talked about how Data technically might actually have emotions in a way. It's just different from human emotions, and he just doesn't know how to call them that. But there's evidence to suggest that in some way he does. He just doesn't understand that that's what they are. And we've had that conversation a few times, and I kind of like this idea that he just can't recognize emotions, whereas Spock is trying actively to avoid them. And I almost, like, when I talked about how Troy could, sense that Spock really does have them, he's just kind of hiding them. I kind of like the idea of the implication being there that not that she can sense that Data has them, because she can't, because it's ones and zeros. It's just not the same thing.
It would be amazing if one day, one episode she could, though. She was
oh,
like,
yeah,
I
that'd be a
swear
great
I just
moment.
felt something from Data.
Yeah, and Data doesn't acknowledge it because he hasn't realised that he's had it. But
it's the sort of thing, especially after, it would have been too early at that point in the show, but if you do it after like a character's death, especially, if it's someone that, he's close to, obviously it was too early to do that with Tasha, Data hadn't had enough development.
Again, you don't have to make it overt, and you don't have to have it be definitive. Just have her kind of look back at him like, did I just feel something from him? And just leave it at that. It can be vague, it can be ambiguous, and
but that would be an amazing beat to have at some point.
Just a one moment of that might have been something, but we'll never know, and just leave it there for us to stew on. That's a great idea.
For idiots on the internet to argue over whether or not it meant anything. That's all that happens.
Yeah. But failing all that, I would have liked to have seen, I don't know, I
think it comes down to just a more engaging plot at the end of the day.
Ultimately,
whereas the end goal of this plot with the purpose of Unification, Spock's choice at the end is interesting, and that is good stuff. But the vast majority of the episode is kind of just waiting around, and it's not that interesting to watch, barring these handful of moments.
Have I put them in a situation where Picard has to convince Starfleet or convince someone that this is something they should be helping these two try strive for, or alternatively, and they almost kind of get there because Spock has to explain what he's doing here, but almost flip it. Have Spock have to be the Picard. Have Spock have to be the one to make the point to Picard as to why this is important and why this is something that needs to be fought for no matter what.
They're so close to getting to that, aren't they?
Yeah, it gets, it's kind of touching on it, but it never quite hits that. And I guess the sad part is that this episode is neither the best of Spock or the best of Next Gen. And I think you were hoping for the best of one of them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you get either. You get okay of either. Decent standard of either.
I think okay is probably a little harsh. You get perfectly good of either, which, again, I guess at the time was probably great.
Admittedly, I don't think people have hyped this one up. I think it hyped up because of the name, because of who was involved. That's kind of just a natural hype. Because I was about to say that I feel this is the first time that one of the hyped up episodes has actually kind of underdelivered. But to be fair, I don't think anyone's actually hyped this one up to us. It just kind of naturally got that hype because of what it was.
Yeah, which I'm sure is the same for everyone who ever watched this.
Yeah, probably.
Assuming they cared about Star Trek beforehand.
Yeah, obviously. So, I mean, the other things we didn't mention, of course, is we have the subplot,
the entire other plot. Yeah,
but I mean, it unsurprisingly, it ties in eventually. Basically, the Romulans have been stealing old Vulcan ships because they want to pretend and lure them into a trap where it's actually an invasion, and that's what that stolen ship was that crashed. Last episode was all about, and it basically just it's Riker chatting up some alien pianist because she used to be married to a smuggler. I'll be honest, because of the connection because of Spock being in this episode, I really thought they were going to sort of say this was Harry Mudd's wife or something. I really
that
thought
never crossed my mind.
I really thought they were going to pull some other connection to the original series. I'm glad they didn't. Like, I'm not saying I wanted that. It just something about her demeanor felt like she could have been married to Harry Mudd. I'm getting Harry Mudd wife vibes from this, which doesn't make a lot of sense because he was human, but I mean she's not human. Maybe she lives for a long time more than him. But regardless, it's him kind of flirting with her a little bit, and then Worf wanting to hear some Klingon opera. It kind of just feels like a series of bad jokes, to be honest, this subplot.
Yeah, and they went all in on the Clown Opera. He's just there, like, belting it out for a good, like, 20 seconds. I'm like, why are we doing this?
And then they're waiting for a fat Ferengi who's going to have some intel about, you know, the buyer or whoever got the ship or whatever it was.
And then they threatened said fat Ferengi to give them the information.
Yes, yeah, Riker shoves his dinner on him and grabs him all menacingly, and he talks. Not that engaging, honestly, and the humour here was a bit of a misfire.
I think the only thing that stops this being utterly atrocious is Frakes being engaging to watch, no matter what.
Honestly, my favourite joke of the episode is there's a period where Picard, Spock, and Data have been like kind of captured by the Romulans when the plans all come to because the senator who was there helping Spock double crosses them, and they get held captive, and Data basically rigs a hologram thing up. My favorite joke in the whole episode is that it's Riker in two red shirts, but Riker's hair's all kind of flattened and sort of swept to the side, and it's kind of weird. I'm like, why is his hair weird? And then after everything goes well and the holograms trick Tasha or Stella, sorry. Picard just goes, well done, Data. Although I don't think you got Commander Riker's hair quite right.
He's like, don't worry, we won't tell him.
It just made me laugh that everything else about it was perfect because obviously it's just Frakes playing the part, but they just like combed his hair to the side with some water just to make it look silly.
Yeah,
I don't know. That made me laugh. I also love it's the bald man who's like, I don't think you got the hair quite right. Just add an extra little tinge of irony onto the whole thing.
Maybe Riker's very proud of his hair.
He strikes me as someone who's proud of his hair.
He does, doesn't he?
He strikes me as someone who, had he went bald, which he hasn't, he was on Picard season 1, and he, still, he's an old man now, but he's still got that full head of hair. But had he went bald, he probably would have like cried himself to sleep every night for years.
You get the impression that specifically Riker here, not Frakes.
Yes,
Riker is a very vain man.
Mm-hmm.
Right, when it comes to his looks, he wants to know he can charm the ladies of any species.
Yes. He's a Star-Lord before Star-Lord.
Kind of is. He is kind of a prototype.
I don't think that makes or Picard Yondu, obviously. Very different characters, but
yeah, that would be a stretch.
Yes. Although there's an argument for Worf being Groot. Or Drax even. More of a Drax. Now that I'm thinking about it.
I think Data would be the Drax.
He's
the one who doesn't get all the idioms, etc.
They're kind of a mishmash between though, because the brawn and the big security chief kind of style, that's more Drax, right?
It is.
But you're right, no, the lack of understanding of the humour and that side of it's definitely there. I guess what we're saying is that those Guardians characters are just basically someone took the Star Trek Next Gen cast, put them into like a series of dice and just sort of rolled some dice and said, okay, this character's got those qualities and this character's got a mix of those two qualities.
There are significantly worse ways to create characters. Let's be honest. It could have got a lot worse.
But yeah. So yes, the biggest missed opportunity, let it be said, of this episode is that Spock and what's her face, Troy, don't get to interact, because I actually think that might have been quite fascinating. Mm-hmm. No pun intended.
Yeah, you've used that word like 4 times, completely independently of Spock in this review now, and every time you say it, I keep thinking, really, you're gonna keep doing that?
It wasn't intentional.
That's the thing. I don't think it was ever intentional, which is why I didn't call you out on it.
It's just the words in my head, I guess. So.
Yeah,
but but if something's genuinely fascinating, it's genuinely fascinating. You
can say interesting.
I used that a couple. But interest is not as good as fascinating. Fascinating is far more enthusiastic.
No, I'll give you that one.
Yeah. Captivating, but yeah, that's kind of
that's a good one.
That's slightly different from fascinating, though.
It is. Captivating implies attention.
More stimulating.
Yeah, whereas fascinating's it's a thought project. It's do you know what I think it is? Fascinating's looking back, captivating's looking forward.
Okay. I can kind of make sense of that.
There's a weird logic to that, I know, but like I think that kind of made sense.
As Dougie says, make sense of it. So.
Sorry, the random Twin Peaks reference caught me off guard.
Well, David Lynch has filmed something, and someone looked at the set photo of where he was filming, and it was clearly in the house of where the brothers lived in that season of Twin Peaks. Now, it could be a coincidence, but it was clearly that same house. Believe.
Please.
Believe. It's happening again. Believe. Anyway, this has been your Star Trek discussion, not your Twin Peaks discussion. So, let us know what you think of Unification 2 in the comments. Like and subscribe. That is the simple and free way to support everything we do. And
give us your opinions on Hugo Weaving.
Yes. And I'm curious to see the response to this one, because I feel like some people might be surprised that we were kind of negative. And I say kind of because we're negative in the sense that it feels like a misfire and that it could have been much, much better.
I think had you removed the elements of Spock from this episode, we'd have been going, yeah, it's a fine episode.
Yeah.
You know, we'd have not had that much to say on it, I don't think.
I mean, the Spock stuff does elevate it. I mean, if you take out the Spock scene with Data and then the mind meld at the end, then all of a sudden it does go down to like a middle of the road episode at that point.
It does, but there's not enough of that Spock stuff to push it into the great territory.
No. It's a shame. You can also support us, of course, financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and keep all the content coming. But otherwise, that is us, and we will see you next time. Hopefully next week. I'm hoping we'll actually be able to knock these out weekly. Now we're back on the.
It's the dream.
Back on the back on the healthy side of life. So we'll see for the next episode soon. Keep watching Star Trek, and somewhere out there, Wesley Crusher is in complete control.